Hi, this is Claudia Carella, and today we're tackling one issue at a time. We are joined by Revital Madar, who is a Marie Curie Research Fellow at the Robert Schuman Centre here at the European University Institute. Welcome, Revital.
Thank you.
Today, together, we are tackling war and double standards. Why do you believe European responses to Ukraine's invasion differed significantly from other conflicts and refugee situations?
Why is always a hard question to answer. It implies intentions we usually don't have clear access to. But I think that we should look at the EU's treatment of Israel prior to October 7 and not to just isolate October 7 and then the current attack on Gaza. And Israel has always enjoyed a very exceptional treatment, especially by the West, in the sense that regardless of the many violations of human rights, of the violations of international law, there is really a culture of impunity towards Israel that we see time and again. In the case of October 7, clearly October 7 was shocking to everyone, but we should keep in mind that violence is part and parcel of the situation between Israel and the Palestinian territories, and that was simply, and really entre guillemets, the first time that we Israelis were victims at that scale throughout the years, and I'm really speaking about the more than 75 years. Palestinians are targeted time and again, different scales each time, and most we get from the European Union and from other Western allies of Israel is really condemnation. And I think the issue with Europe's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, of course, there is temporal proximity. But aside from the temporal proximity, what we saw in relation to Ukraine was really that another politics is possible. That even that it's possible to sanction even a big state like Russia to risk the inflation we are experiencing now. That it's possible to have refugees and immigrants from Ukraine coming into Europe with procedures that most refugees who are already in Europe or refugees that come and asylum seekers who come from Africa can only dream of. We are 8 months, almost 8 months, I think, since October 7. Until now, there isn't one European state who really said, and of course there is no decision of the European Union to even just allow Palestinians in. The situation in Gaza, all the reports show there is starvation, kids are dying from the bombing, because they don't have access to medical care and to food, yet Palestinians are left to themselves. They need to pay thousands of dollars to enter Egypt if they are lucky, and now even that is no longer a possibility because the border with Rafah, the Rafah crossing was closed by Israel, and of course we can judge Egypt as to why it doesn't let all the Palestinians go through, but at the same time you can ask why there isn't any Western ally or say to Egypt, please open the border, we will host them, and also promising Palestinians that Gaza will be rebuilt, that people would be able to go back, because currently Palestinians leave Gaza knowing that the chances they can come back, the chances they will see their family again are extremely, extremely low. So until now, no sanctions against Israel, despite the fact that the ICJ has said that the situation there can amount to a genocide, despite the fact that this genocide is filmed on camera by the victims. It's also filmed by the perpetrators themselves. And yet, we get nothing aside from condemnations. So I think really Ukraine proved that it is possible. It is possible to take really, really meaningful measures quickly to add people, to give them the humanitarian aid they need, to move them to safe spaces. And we don't see anything that comes near that when it comes to Palestinians.
Let's continue on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Could the mixed responses from the EU to the Hamas attack on Israel and Israel's war in Gaza be reflecting a double standard? And where does it stem from?
I think there are two things in here. Really, you asked before why. Now, I cannot give a real answer to the question why. I don't live in the minds of the people who run the European Union. But of course, there is a complex of guilt in Europe regarding Jewish people. Unfortunately, after the Second World War, instead of finding a way to do the processes that the European societies had to go through in order to deal with their anti-Semitism, the solution that was chosen simply to take all the Jews and put them in another territory where there are other people. So in that sense, Europe solved the Jewish question by simply reducing the number of Jews that live in Europe. So of course, there is this aspect of guilt among many European states, especially Germany, but not only. And in that sense, we can see that there is almost an attempt to transfer the guilt over the Holocaust to the Palestinians. And I think that, on the other hand, we should remember that really international humanitarian law and international law in general gives a lot of protections to sovereign nation states. There is a sort of confusion because Gaza is not a state. This is not a sovereign state. Israel wasn't attacked by a sovereign nation state. Yet the response of really the complete support of Israel's right to defend itself, I didn't understand how people could say it without knowing specifically that we will arrive at that moment. So I think there are different issues that go into play here. The guilt, the overall exceptional treatment of Israel through the years, and really we add to that really all the advantages and privileges Israel enjoys as a sovereign nation state, whether it is in line with the international law, or not.
So to go back to Europe, how do you reconcile Europe's identity as a normative power? An entity that cares about shared values and principle with its inconsistent approach to the Israel-Palestine conflict?
The genocide still continues, and there is still much to do. Israel claims the attack on Rafah even didn't begin, despite the fact that there are high casualties every day and people were again demanded to be evacuated from this area. Israel is a very, very small state. It means that if the European Union and other Western states have decided they have the capacity to put sanctions on a state like Russia, prior to it on a state like Iran, they are most capable of putting sanctions on Israel in all sorts of ways. Currently in Israel, we start to see voices coming from academia calling for a ceasefire. This comes not so much because people understood suddenly that the situation cannot continue, but because what we do see in the last few years is more and more the BDS is getting stronger. There is real fear of Israel becoming a very isolated state, and these petitions that come out of Israeli academics explicitly say we are in great danger. Israeli university cannot thrive without collaboration with other universities outside of Israel. So I think we have a situation in which it's really easy to put pressure. Whether it would make Israel really rethink its policy, I don't know, but it's worth trying. And I'm going back to the second issue of really Palestinian refugees. Those who are lucky, so-called, are stuck many times in Egypt without a legal status because they are given only a 40 days visa. We should give these people the possibility to rebuild their life in a space, in a safe space, until they will be able to go back to their lands. So I think there is really much that the European Union can do currently, if it's just offering visas to refugees from Gaza, if it's really putting real pressure on Israel, not only condemning it rhetorically. I think there are plenty of things that the European Union can do, as well as rethinking all the arms that Germany is selling to Israel and are killing Palestinians, majority of which are civilians.
Finally, recent developments at the International Criminal Court seeking arrest warrants for Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Minister, plus multiple reports about the potential genocide in Palestine being a sort of a reckoning for the West and signaling a shift towards a new understanding of the conflict?
I think we are in a turning point. That is clear. Whether that would really bring a dramatic change in the near future, it's hard to say, because even with the arrest warrants, we want to see the court really accepting the demand to get arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. But I think what we see now is really very often there is in Europe in general, and not only in Europe, that's a global problem today, a big gap between public opinion and government policies. I think for majority of the public it's very clear what should be done and where things are going. Yet for the governments it takes longer, and for the international bodies. It's really hard for me to think about the UN, because until now, every resolution that came about was vetoed by the US. Yet it does indicate that there is a change in the overall approach to Israel and to Palestinians and the question of Palestine in general. And I want to believe that in a few years, this terrible tragedy that happened to Palestinians, but also to Israeli Jews and other civilians, would really lead us toward a solution. But I feel it is terrible, really, really terrible. We had to get to this moment because we, as in people who criticize Israel for years, Palestinians, of course, who keep on telling us what their life look like, we could have listened to them before and prevent both October 7 and the current genocide that is still ongoing.